The Massey Ferguson dealer in West Des Moines had made it sound simple. Matt Holloway sat in the showroom on a cold January afternoon in 2024, listening to the sales pitch, and everything the dealer said made sense. The 8S Type 265 tractors were priced competitively. Fuel efficiency was exceptional. The Dyna VT transmission technology was proven. And most importantly, the dealer support was guaranteed. The sales rep, a guy named Brian Kelso, had been emphatic about it. He said parts availability was best in class. He said the AGCO distribution network could get any component to the dealership within 48 hours. He said if Matt ever had a breakdown during a critical window, they'd move heaven and earth to get him running. Matt had asked specifically about that. He'd said my operation runs on tight margins and tighter timelines. I can't afford to have equipment down for a week waiting on parts. Brian had nodded like he'd heard this concern 1,000 times. He'd pulled up the parts availability metrics on his computer, showed Matt the inventory levels at the regional warehouse in Omaha, showed him the expedited shipping options, showed him the dealer's service record. 96% of emergency parts requests fulfilled within 2 business days. Brian had said we take parts support seriously. It's not just marketing, it's infrastructure. Matt had believed him. He'd done his research. He'd talked to other Massey Ferguson operators. Most of them had positive things to say. A few had mentioned occasional parts delays, but nothing catastrophic. And the cost savings were significant. Matt could get 3 Massey Ferguson 8S 265 tractors for about $180,000 less than 3 equivalent John Deere 8R models. Over a 7-year finance term, that translated to real money. Money he could invest in land improvements, seed upgrades, or just financial buffer. Matt ran a 1,900-acre corn and soybean operation outside Marshalltown, Iowa. He wasn't a huge player, but he wasn't small either. And at his scale, $180,000 mattered. So in February 2024, Matt signed the purchase agreement. 3 Massey Ferguson 8S 265 tractors. Total package price of $687,000, financed at 5.4% over 7 years. Monthly payments of $9,840. Delivery scheduled for late March, just in time for spring field prep. Brian shook Matt's hand and said, "You made the right choice. These machines are going to change your operation." The tractors arrived on March 28th. Matt spent the first week getting familiar with the controls, the cab technology, the CVT system. His 2 operators, guys who'd been with him for years, adapted quickly. The 8S 265s were smooth, quiet, responsive. Fuel consumption during the initial field work was tracking exactly where Brian had promised. By mid-April, Matt was running spring tillage across his entire acreage, and the Massey Fergusons were performing flawlessly. Planting started in late April. Matt ran a tight operation. His planting window was typically 18 to 21 days depending on weather. He had the window mapped out, 3 tractors running simultaneously, each one covering about 85 acres per day. If everything went smoothly, he'd have all 1,900 acres planted by May 20th. That gave him buffer for weather delays and minor mechanical issues. The schedule wasn't aggressive, it was realistic, but it required all 3 tractors to stay operational. May 3rd started like every other day that week. Clear skies, good soil temps. Matt's operators were in the field by 6:30 a.m. 2 of the Massey Fergusons were running planning duty. The 3rd was on grain cart transport, shuttling last season's remaining corn to the elevator. By 10 a.m., Matt had covered 41 acres. By 2 p.m., he was at 76 acres. Right on schedule. Then at 2:47 p.m., one of the operators called Matt on the radio. Said the tractor was losing power. Engine was sputtering. Couldn't maintain RPM under load. Matt told him to shut it down and switch to the backup tractor. He'd come take a look. Matt drove out to the field and found the Massey Ferguson 8S by 265 sitting mid-row. Engine idling rough. The diagnostic screen was showing a fuel system fault. Error code P0193. Fuel rail pressure sensor circuit high input. Matt pulled up the service manual on his phone. The code indicated a problem with the fuel injection system. Could be the sensor itself, could be the fuel pump, could be a wiring issue. But it wasn't something Matt could fix in the field. He called the dealership in West Des Moines, got Brian Kelso on the phone, explained the situation. Brian said, "Bring it in, we'll diagnose it." Matt said, "I can't bring it in. I'm in the middle of planting. I need someone to come out here, or I need the part overnighted so I can install it myself." Brian said, "Let me talk to the service manager and call you back." 30 minutes later, Brian called. He said the service manager thinks it's likely the high-pressure fuel pump based on the code. It's not a sensor issue. The pump is failing. We don't have that part in stock, but I can order it from the warehouse in Omaha. Should be here tomorrow afternoon. Matt asked if they could expedite it. Brian said it's already expedited. "This is our standard emergency parts protocol. You'll have it by end of day tomorrow. We'll send a tech out to install it the day after. You'll be down maybe 36 hours total." Matt didn't love it, but it was manageable. 36 hours meant he'd lose about half a day of planting. He could make it up by running longer hours over the weekend. He thanked Brian and hung up. Then he pulled the disabled tractor off the field with another machine and parked it by the shop. His 2 remaining Massey Fergusons kept working. May 4th came and went. No part. Matt called the dealership at 4 p.m. Brian said the warehouse had shipped it that morning. Should arrive by tomorrow. Matt asked why it didn't come today like promised. Brian said there must have been a delay in processing the order, but it's definitely in transit now. "I'll send you the tracking number." Matt got the tracking number, checked it online. The part had shipped, but it wasn't scheduled to arrive until May 6th. 2 more days. Matt called Brian back, said, "You told me 48 hours. It's been over 48 hours, and now I'm looking at 4 days total." Brian apologized, said sometimes the warehouse shipping estimates are off, but the part is moving. You'll have it Monday morning. Matt hung up and recalculated his planting schedule. 4 days of downtime meant he was losing nearly 170 acres of productivity. He'd have to run extended hours to compensate. It was frustrating, but still recoverable. He told his operators to focus on the remaining 2 tractors and maximize output. May 6th arrived. No part. Matt checked the tracking number. The shipment showed as delayed in transit. No explanation. No updated delivery date. Matt called the dealership, got transferred to the parts department, talked to a guy named Steve who said the shipment had been rerouted due to a carrier issue. It was now expected on May 7th. Matt asked what carrier issue. Steve said he didn't have details, just that the logistics provider had flagged the shipment for rerouting. It happens sometimes with expedited freight. Matt asked if they could send another part from a different warehouse. Steve said this was the only warehouse that had the part in stock. The next closest inventory was in Kansas, and that would take just as long. Matt felt the first real edge of panic. He was now 5 days into a breakdown that was supposed to be fixed in 36 hours. He'd lost over 200 acres of planting time. His window was shrinking, and the dealer kept giving him excuses instead of solutions. May 7th, no part. The tracking information now showed the shipment as pending location scan. It had disappeared into the carrier's system somewhere between Omaha and Des Moines. Matt called the dealership again, demanded to speak to the service manager, got a guy named Tom Reichert. Tom said he was aware of the situation, said they were escalating with the carrier, said they were exploring alternative options, including having a technician drive to Omaha to pick up another part if one became available. Matt said this is unacceptable. You guaranteed 48-hour parts availability. I'm on day 6. Tom said he understood Matt's frustration, said they were doing everything they could, said this was a highly unusual situation. Matt said, "I don't care if it's unusual. I need the part." Tom said, "We're working on it." Matt hung up and sat in his truck. He was now 380 acres behind schedule. The weather forecast showed rain moving in by May 10th. If he didn't get the tractor running in the next 2 days, he was going to miss a significant portion of his planting window. And unlike equipment breakdowns in other seasons, planting delays had direct yield consequences. Late planted crops mature later, face higher weed pressure, experience more stress during pollination. Every day of delay reduced his projected yield by approximately 1.5%. He'd already lost enough time to cost him 9% yield reduction on the acres he hadn't planted yet. May 8th, the dealership called Matt. Tom Reichert said they'd located the lost shipment. It had been misrouted to a facility in Kansas City. The carrier was working to redirect it. New estimated arrival date was May 10th. Tom said as an alternative, they'd sourced a fuel pump from another dealer in Minnesota. It could be at Matt's farm by May 9th if he was willing to pay for expedited courier service. Cost would be $340. Matt said yes. Do it. I'll pay whatever it costs. Tom said he'd arrange it and call back with confirmation. 2 hours later, Tom called back, said the Minnesota dealer had sold the part to another customer that morning. It was no longer available. They were back to waiting for the original shipment. Matt lost it. He said, "You've been telling me for 6 days that this part was coming. You guaranteed 48-hour support. I bought this equipment based on that promise. And now I'm sitting here with a dead tractor, a collapsing planning schedule, and you're telling me you can't get me a fuel pump." Tom tried to calm him down, said he understood, said this was an anomaly, said they'd never had a parts delay this severe before. Matt said, "I don't care about your track record. I care about my operation. And right now, your promises are costing me everything." Tom said if the part arrives on May 10th as projected, they'd send a technician out immediately. Have Matt running same day. Matt said, and if it doesn't arrive, Tom didn't have an answer. May 9th, no update. Matt called the dealership 3 times, got voicemail each time. Finally reached Tom at 4 p.m. Tom said the shipment was still in transit, still showing May 10th delivery. Nothing had changed. Matt asked if they'd identified any other parts sources. Tom said they were checking with AGCO Corporate but hadn't found anything yet. Matt hung up and walked into his shop, stared at the Massey Ferguson 8S265 sitting there. Useless. A $230,000 piece of equipment, immobilized by a fuel pump that should have been a 48-hour fix. He thought about Brian Kelso's promises, about the parts availability metrics, about the infrastructure guarantees, and he realized it had all been marketing. The dealer didn't control the supply chain. They didn't have backup inventory. They didn't have contingency plans. They just had a standard ordering system that worked fine under normal conditions and collapsed completely under pressure. May 10th. The part didn't arrive. The tracking information showed it had been delayed again due to address verification issues. Matt didn't even call the dealership. He just sat at his kitchen table and stared at the calendar. He'd now lost 9 full days of planting. He was 640 acres behind schedule. The rain was forecast to start that evening and continue through May 12th. Even if the part arrived tomorrow and the tractor was fixed immediately, he'd miss 3 more days to weather. That put him at May 13th before he could resume planting. 12 days of downtime total. Over 800 acres unplanted. Yield losses projecting at 18% on those acres. Matt ran the financial numbers. His operation was financed on projected revenue of $482 per bushel at 195 bushels per acre across 1,900 acres. Total projected revenue, $1.79 million. But if he lost 18% yield on 840 acres, that dropped his total production by 29,484 bushels. At 4.82 cents per bushel, that was $142,104 in lost revenue. His operating costs were fixed regardless of yield. Seed, chemical, fuel, labor, equipment payments. Those didn't change, which meant the lost revenue came straight out of profit. Matt's operating loan was due in September. He needed to net at least $340,000 to make the payment and cover his equipment financing. The yield loss from the planting delay would drop his net to approximately $287,000. He'd be $53,000 short, and his lender wasn't going to accept "my tractor broke down" as an explanation. Equipment failures weren't covered by crop insurance. The risk was entirely on Matt. May 11th. The part finally arrived. Not at the dealership, at Matt's farm. The carrier had apparently corrected the address issue and delivered directly. Matt opened the box and pulled out the high-pressure fuel pump. He called the dealership and told them he had the part. Asked when the technician could come out to install it. Tom said their tech was booked solid through May 13th. Earliest they could get to Matt's farm was May 14th. Matt said, "I've been waiting 11 days for this part. You're telling me I have to wait 3 more days for installation?" Tom said the part installation requires specialized equipment and diagnostic software. It's not a field repair Matt could do himself. Matt said then send the tech out after hours. Pay him overtime. I'll cover the cost. Tom said he'd check with the tech and call back. Tom called back 20 minutes later, said the tech could come out on the evening of May 12th. After the rain cleared, installation would take about 3 hours. Matt would be running by morning on May 13th. Total downtime, 12 days. Matt said fine. Then he hung up and went outside. Stood in his driveway as the rain started, watched the water hit the fields he hadn't planted, and he realized he was going to lose the farm. Not immediately. But the math was clear. He'd miss his loan payment in September. The bank would start asking questions. By spring 2025, they'd be talking about restructuring or liquidation. And all of it traced back to a single fuel pump that Massey Ferguson promised would arrive in 48 hours and took 12 days. The technician showed up on the evening of May 12th. Nice guy. Apologetic. He said he'd heard about the parts delay and felt terrible. He installed the fuel pump in 2.5 hours, ran diagnostics. The tractor fired up clean, no error codes, full power restored. He handed Matt the invoice, parts and labor, $4,680. Matt signed it without reading it. May 13th. Matt resumed planting, but the weather didn't cooperate. Soil conditions were marginal after the rain. He managed to cover 140 acres before conditions deteriorated and he had to stop. May 14th was worse. Only got 90 acres done. By May 15th, he was back to full capacity, but he was still 610 acres behind. Matt ran extended hours, 18-hour days. His operators rotated shifts. They worked through the weekend. By May 22nd, all 1,900 acres were finally planted. But the damage was done. The late planted sections emerged poorly. Germination rates were down. Early growth was stunted. And by mid-June, it was obvious those 840 acres were going to underperform significantly. Matt spent the summer watching his projections deteriorate. The late planted corn hit pollination during a heat wave in late July. Kernel set was poor. The soybeans planted after May 20th faced higher weed competition and lower yield potential. By August, Matt was projecting total production at 168 bushels per acre on corn instead of 195. On soybeans, 44 instead of 52. The numbers were catastrophic. Harvest came in September. Matt's actual yields matched his worst projections. Total production was down 31,200 bushels compared to target. Revenue loss, $150,336. His operating loan payment was due September 30th. He was $56,000 short. He called his banker and explained the situation. The banker was sympathetic but firm. The bank needed the payment. They could offer a 60-day extension, but after that, if Matt couldn't cover the shortfall, they'd need to discuss restructuring the loan. Matt asked what restructuring meant. The banker said it could mean higher interest rates, additional collateral requirements, or in worst-case scenarios, asset liquidation. Matt hung up and sat in his office. He had 60 days to find $56,000. He didn't have it. His only option was to take out a short-term bridge loan at predatory interest rates, which would just push the problem into next year. Matt called Brian Kelso at the Massey Ferguson dealership. Asked if there was any way the dealership could help. Any warranty coverage for yield losses caused by parts delays. Brian said he was sorry, but there was no provision for that. Equipment warranties covered mechanical failures, not consequential damages. Matt said consequential damages? I lost my farm because you couldn't deliver a fuel pump. Brian said he understood Matt's frustration, but the delay had been due to carrier issues outside the dealership's control. It wasn't a warranty matter. Matt asked to speak to the owner. Brian transferred him. Matt spent 20 minutes explaining what had happened, the promises, the delays, the financial devastation. The owner listened. Then he said, "We're genuinely sorry this happened. We'll offer you a $1,500 service credit for future maintenance, and we'll make sure your account gets priority on any future parts orders." Matt said, "I'm losing my farm and you're offering me $1,500. The owner said, "It's what we can do within our policy constraints. Parts delays are unfortunate, but they're a reality in this industry. We can't be held financially responsible for every downstream consequence." Matt hung up. He sat there for a long time. Then he called a lawyer, asked if he had any legal recourse against the dealership. The lawyer reviewed the purchase agreement, said the warranty language was airtight. There was no provision for consequential damages, no guarantee of specific parts delivery timelines. The dealer had made verbal promises, but those weren't legally binding. The only enforceable terms were in the written contract, and the written contract protected the dealer completely. Matt couldn't afford to fight it in court anyway. He was out of money and out of options. He took out a bridge loan at 14% interest, covered the operating loan payment, and immediately started trying to sell assets. He listed one of the Massey Ferguson 8S265 tractors, the one that had broken down, put it on every auction site he could find. Starting price $185,000, no bids. He dropped it to $170,000. Still nothing. Dropped it to $155,000. Finally got a buyer at $148,000. Took a $82,000 loss on an 18-month-old tractor. The sale covered part of his debt, but he was still underwater. By November, the bank was making noise about calling the loan. Matt's accountant ran the projections for 2025. Even with a perfect growing season, Matt wouldn't generate enough cash flow to service all his debt. The operation was functionally insolvent. In December 2024, Matt made the decision. He was selling the farm. He contacted a land broker, listed the one in 1,900 acres, listed the remaining equipment, and started the process of shutting down an operation that had been in his family for 2 generations. The sale closed in March 2025. Matt netted $340,000 after paying off all debts. It was enough to avoid bankruptcy. Barely. Matt moved his family to Omaha, got a job managing logistics for a trucking company. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was now working in the same supply chain system that had destroyed his farming operation. His wife found work as a school administrator. His kids adjusted. But Matt never stopped thinking about May 3rd, 2024, the day a fuel pump failed and a Massey Ferguson dealer promised a 48-hour fix that took 12 days. He wrote letters, not to the dealership, to ATCO Corporate, to the executives who ran Massey Ferguson. He detailed what had happened, explained how their parts infrastructure had failed, explained how dealer promises didn't match supply chain reality, explained how a single component failure had cascaded into total financial collapse. He sent 14 letters over 6 months. He got 2 responses. Both were form letters thanking him for his feedback and assuring him that customer satisfaction was a priority. In 2026, Matt saw a news article about ATCO investing in parts distribution infrastructure improvements, building new regional warehouses, implementing better inventory tracking systems, partnering with logistics providers to improve delivery times. The article quoted an AGCO executive saying the company was committed to best-in-class parts support for its dealer network. Matt read it and felt nothing. The improvements were coming 3 years too late for him. Matt's story spread through farming communities in Iowa. It became a cautionary tale, not about Massey Ferguson specifically, but about the gap between dealer promises and infrastructure reality, about the risk of trusting verbal guarantees that weren't backed by contractual commitments, about how a single parts failure during a critical window could destroy an entire operation. Other farmers who'd been considering Massey Ferguson equipment reconsidered. Some switched to brands with more robust regional parts networks. Some decided the cost savings weren't worth the risk. Massey Ferguson's dealer in West Des Moines saw sales drop 40% in 2025. Brian Kelso left the dealership, took a job with a John Deere dealer in Minnesota. The owner eventually sold the Massey Ferguson franchise and converted the location to a New Holland dealership. Matt never went back to farming. His kids grew up in Omaha with no connection to agriculture, and the 1,900 acres that had been in his family for 2 generations were now owned by a corporate farming operation that ran John Deere equipment exclusively. In 2027, Matt got a call from a journalist writing a story about equipment dealer consolidation and parts availability issues in rural America. The journalist had heard Matt's story and wanted to interview him. Matt agreed. The article ran in a major agricultural publication in August 2027. It detailed Matt's experience, included quotes from the dealer, included responses from ATCO, and it ended with Matt saying the equipment was fine. The Massey Ferguson 8S.265 was a good tractor. But infrastructure matters more than engineering. And if a dealer can't deliver parts when they promise to, the quality of the equipment is irrelevant. The article generated responses from dozens of other farmers who'd experienced similar parts delays with various brands. The problem wasn't unique to Massey Ferguson. It was systemic across the industry. But Massey Ferguson, with its smaller market share and less developed parts network, was particularly vulnerable. ATCO responded to the article with a press release announcing further investments in parts infrastructure. They highlighted new distribution centers, new partnerships with expedited carriers, new inventory management software. They said they took customer concerns seriously and were committed to continuous improvement. They didn't mention Matt by name, didn't acknowledge his specific case, just issued corporate language about commitment to service excellence. Matt read the press release and closed his laptop. He was 3 years removed from farming, working a job he didn't love in a city he didn't want to live in. His family was stable, his kids were doing fine, but he'd lost something that couldn't be quantified in financial terms. He'd lost the farm, the legacy, the identity. And it had all collapsed because a fuel pump that was supposed to arrive in 48 hours took 23 days. Matt kept the invoice from the repair, the one the technician had given him on May 12th. He framed it and hung it in his garage in Omaha. $4,680 for parts and labor, 12 days of downtime, $105,336 in lost revenue, and a farm that no longer existed. He looked at it sometimes, reminded himself that promises without infrastructure are just marketing, and that in agriculture, where timing is everything and margins are thin, a single broken promise can cost you everything you've built. The Massey Ferguson 8S.265 that broke down was eventually resold by the buyer Matt had sold it to. It went to a farmer in Nebraska, ran fine for 2 years, never had another fuel pump issue. The tractor itself was solid, the engineering was sound, but that didn't matter to Matt, because the tractor had never been the problem. The problem was a parts distribution system that couldn't deliver on the promises the sales team made. The problem was a dealer who guaranteed 48-hour support without having the infrastructure to back it up. The problem was that Matt had trusted words instead of contracts, and he'd paid for that trust with everything he had.